Hello imaginary internet friends. So maybe you wanted to learn the piano and you asked the internet how and where to do it, and you got attacked by a whole bunch of ads of apps and websites and tutorials, all promising to be the one perfect method that will teach you how to play the piano for like almost no money and no effort, and you'll be always entertained and you'll never be bored ever again, and all your dreams will come true if only you pay them your hard-earned money. But not a lot of it, so like what's there to even think about? In fact, don't think about it, just do it. It's now or never. Well, since you're here, I assume it must have happened to you. Heck, it happened to me, even though I didn't look up how to play the piano on the internet. One of the top search results is Pianote. They brag that they have over 91k active users and they have a significant presence on YouTube. So I thought I might as well review their courses for the benefit of all the imaginary internet people just like you. Now, we need to clarify a few things. This review is not sponsored. As of recording and publishing this video, I've never had any affiliation or involvement with this company, or any other company for that matter. I do not benefit from praising or bashing them. It's also an opinion. Informed, but an opinion nonetheless. You can agree or disagree, as long as you're not an ass about it. I'm looking at the courses from a perspective of a person with a piano performance degree. Part of my course was education and methodology, and I have more years of experience as a piano teacher than I'm willing to admit. I'm not bragging, I just thought you might want to know my credentials before you listen to what I have to say. With that out of the way, let's get into it. A quick look at the website allows you to see lots of adjectives and frankly pretty typical marketing fluff. Teachers are great and world-class, practice is fun, you'll play beautifully, remain inspired, you get the idea. There's a trailer available. The main tagline is, you can play the piano like you've always wanted. They put great emphasis on expressing yourself creatively and playing the songs you love, and they really do make sure to let you know they have 1,000 songs available once you become their customer. There is also some talk about combining technology and tradition to provide you with step-by-step lessons and guided routines without plugging your instrument into, as they call it, a computer game. They promise to teach you to play the piano like you were taught to throw a ball, whatever that means, and in various styles without getting frustrated by music theory and endless exercises, and all you need is 10 minutes a day to improve your skills. Well, golly gee, if that doesn't sound amazing. What I find concerning at first glance is that the majority of their content doesn't have closed captions available, so folks with any form of auditory processing difficulties or simply non-native speakers might find that tricky. The only content with closed captions provided is the YouTube stuff embedded on the website, and even then only the auto captions are available. So in terms of accessibility, do better. Another thing you can realize upon closer inspection is that a lot of provided scores have mistakes in them. Some of them were corrected and the only trace of them ever existing are confused comments, but some of the mistakes seem to have gone unnoticed. Well, I noticed, but I wasn't hired to find and correct them, so I'm never gonna tell anyone where they are. Speaking of scores, they indeed have a big library to browse from. They are divided into 10 levels of difficulty, which I have my reservations about, but that's a topic for a whole other video. You also have a feature that allows you to play along the most awful MIDI I've heard in a while, but at least you can adjust your tempo and add a metronome, I guess. I don't have much to say about the layout of the site itself, but for the sake of being thorough, I'll get it out of the way. To me, it felt pretty crowded and overstimulating, but again, that could just be me. I don't think I can show you anything behind the paywall without getting in trouble, so you can either trust my judgment or go and see for yourself. In which case, let me know in the comments how did that go for you. I'm genuinely curious. There's a lot of stuff on their website, and I'm still not exactly sure what's the difference between things called packs and things called courses, for instance. Either way, I'm first going to talk about something that you're pretty much streamlined towards as a beginner, the Pianote Method. The method is made up of 10 levels. We're now gonna go through my thoughts on the contents. Sometimes I'll be quite picky, but bear with me. There's usually a pretty good reason as to why I point out something seemingly insignificant. So it all starts with a standard video over explaining the course for those who've never used the internet before. The entirety of the first section consists of at best generic but correct and at worst misleading or straight out insane advice. For instance, the idea of playing an instrument before you buy it is definitely a good idea, but also common sense really. That can't be said about straight out encouraging people to place their pianos in the kitchen if they so wish. For the love of God, please do not put any musical instruments in the kitchen unless you want moisture and grease to not so slowly kill them. And do you really want your piano to smell like fried chicken or whatever you people cook? That being said, I'm not your mother, so I can't and I won't stop you from putting your piano in your kitchen or bathroom if you want to do that, but you know, as I told you, it's not exactly optimal. In this section they also promise you'll be getting exact instructions on how long you need to practice and what exactly should be in your practice routine in a given moment. Spoiler alert, that doesn't happen. They give you some general advice about 3 times throughout the entirety of the course, which, mind you, is 175 lessons. And it's not that I've been oblivious to that advice, I've seen a lot of comments complaining about that exact issue. Another thing I find important to talk about is the approach to posture. Generally speaking, the information provided in the course isn't bad, but it is insufficient. And because of that, it's fairly easy to misunderstand certain things. Let me give you an example. If I tell you to relax your hand, it may so happen that the base level of tension in your hand is so high that when you think you've already relaxed it, it's still actually, you know, quite tense. There are ways to guide a person through that problem without working personally with them, but piano doesn't do that. Now, it may seem like a small problem, but having an unnecessarily tense hand leads to at best frustration because you can't play as fast as you'd like to, or you get tired after 5 minutes of practice, and at worst it leads to nasty injuries even when you don't practice that much overall. What personally scared me is the fact that the main instructor of the method, Lisa, admits to having forearm pain from piano playing. Now, I'm not pointing it out to shame her or anything like that. It's a problem that a lot of professional musicians struggle with. However, it's not something that should be happening when you play. Having this kind of pain signifies that there is something in desperate need of fixing in your technique. From a student perspective, it also means that this is what you're learning and it's likely you'll develop the same problems. Another confusing thing is the fact that they generally don't provide fingerings for the music you're playing. They explain it's because every hand is different, which, fair point, I can't disagree here. But trust a beginner to come up with the least practical and the most illogical fingerings that don't make sense for their hand or any human hand. I did that as a kid. Every musician I know did that, and every student I worked with had that tendency, so I guess it's just how it is. And we all insisted it was comfortable, but it wasn't, and it couldn't have been. A solution much better than "it's your hand, go figure it out yourself" is actually providing multiple different variants and giving general how-to guidelines. And since we are already talking about the physical aspects of piano playing, watching the course I saw way too many instances of hand sliding of the keys, and not in the context of like, don't do it.
The music's kind of chilling out, so you can play lightly.
I have a pretty gory story that illustrates perfectly why you shouldn't do this. If you can't hear it, skip to this timestamp. So when I was a kid, about 8 years old, I played piano duo with another kid about the same age. Brad had a tendency to slide his hand off the keys a lot as he played. We were rehearsing for a class concert, some Christmas music, when Brad suddenly yelped and there was blood on the keyboard and he started crying hysterically. Turns out his nail got stuck between the keys and he ripped it off. And we were both traumatized ever since. So don't do that at home, kids. Now to the piano playing part of the method. For a course that promises to skip all the boring exercises, they sure give you lots of those. You spend your first 2 lessons on playing those classic 5-finger exercises that I think most methods and teachers stopped using about 100 years ago. I can't think of anything more boring than that. If your soul wasn't crushed by that experience, you get to move on to playing C major scale, and right after that to playing fifths, or as they call it, power chords, both of which you're severely underprepared for at this point. Learning how to shift your hand position via a scale is like, I don't know, learning how to rollerblade in a forest downhill while being chased by a wild boar. Pretty rough if you ask me. Same with playing 2 notes at the same time. You need already to have a certain level of finger dexterity, which you won't develop by playing however many 5-finger exercises you can squeeze in before dying of boredom. Then immediately we hop onto the first song, Let It Be by the Beatles. Exciting, right? Well, get ready for that song to be the only thing close to music for the next 23 lessons. If you manage to go at the pace of 1 video per week, that's nearly 6 months. Granted, it's a common chord progression and they also present you briefly with The Scientist and Hallelujah, but it's always back to Let It Be until you just can't let it be anymore. And mind you, you won't be playing the melody. If anything, you're expected to sing along, which, playing and singing at the same time is a different, difficult skill for which you have to be at least somewhat confident in both singing and piano separately, which you usually don't achieve by your 11th piano lesson. And I don't know what to tell you if you are just not into singing. You're gonna have a really bad time for the majority of this course. That 11th lesson seems generally problematic, and since it's a very graphic symptom of one of the biggest problems with the Pianote method, I'll briefly elaborate here. As I mentioned, all you played so far was 5-finger exercises, C major scale, and some fifths. If you even got to play with both hands at the same time, you were playing in unison. In that particular lesson, however, you're expected to both move your hands independently from each other, and also you're exposed for the first time to counting with subdivision. I didn't mention anything about music theory you've learned so far, and that's because you didn't. So not only you have two pretty challenging concepts to grasp, but also you lack the tools to understand what you're doing. And looking at the stats visible to users on piano, that's where a lot of people either give up or skip a few lessons and then eventually give up. Of course, I can be wrong, but the significant drop in likes and comments under the method videos from that point on looks to me like a correlation that does imply causation. And the reason is pretty simple. Perhaps you already figured it out, but I'll say it anyway for those in the back. The jump from what you were learning in the previous lessons is too big. This is the first time I noticed it happen in this method, but unfortunately not the last time. However, if you think that's a serious problem, I have another one for you. So you remember how at the beginning of this video I told you that they promise you won't be getting frustrated by music theory? Well, I have a bad news about that one. What I saw in this course was probably the most chaotic, poorly planned and confusing approach to music theory I've ever seen in my life. And my first music teachers were pretty terrible, so the competition was strong. First ick for me was their rhythm and meter explanations. Immediately equating the concept of beats in a bar and the concept of quarter notes is one way to set someone up for confusion. The amount of time spent digressing about how this is math and math is really difficult and so complex would be really amusing if people weren't paying money to see all that. Like really, all you need here is to be able to count to 4 and have a basic understanding of divisions, which even if you aren't very creative, you can explain easily to anyone by using an example of slicing a cake or a pizza. And then of course you need to practice that concept regularly, clapping and tapping rhythms, listening to music and trying to identify the meter, stuff like that. Sure, it can be challenging for some people to get it. It can take some time, but it certainly doesn't help when they try to learn from instructions that are already this unclear. Side note, since the course is in English, it would be a good idea to at least mention the British rhythmical value names. You don't want people to hear demi-semi-quaver and think that some lost millennial who identifies as Griffin Puff is trying to cast a spell on them. Their approach to chords and intervals is also just, evil. You first get exposed to chords, and because the only intervals you know at that point are whole steps and half steps, you get to build chords and their inversions by counting half steps. I'm not sure if you're seeing the problem that I'm seeing, but what I'm seeing is someone showing their student the most inefficient and prone to mistakes approach that will actively hinder their progress. It's like using a calculator to multiply 7 by 8, except you are not using multiplication. Instead, you're just adding 7 to itself 8 times. It's good to know that you can work it out that way, but it's not great if that's the only method you know. It certainly doesn't help that for the majority of the course, actual musical terms are being treated like the plague. Let's not say diatonic, that's a complicated term. Let's not say we're playing intervals or chords melodically and harmonically, those are impossible to remember. Well then, explain those terms and say them so often they stick to memory of your student. Come on, that's such a patronizing approach. But what's even worse, if you're learning that way but you'd like to find out more using different resources, you can't. The terms you know are not widely used and searching for them won't get you anywhere. Now, you may wonder what is the reason for this chaos. I don't think I have one specific thing, but if I were to point out one of the main culprits, it's the fact that Pianote waits till 58th lesson to introduce musical notation. Again, at the generous pace of going through the course 1 video per week, you'd be learning over a year and 2 months before you get there. And for all this time, you are constrained to mostly playing Let It Be scales and 5-finger exercises with a side of confusing music theory explanations. Talk about endless, boring exercises. Honestly, I'd find myself in times of trouble. I can partially understand why they do that though. Lots of the potential customers either have bad childhood memories of trying to learn to read music, or straight out don't think that they could ever possibly learn that. But personally, I disagree with this approach. Western music notation is not perfect, but I'd argue it's pretty easy to understand if you're provided with clear enough instructions and you aren't scared of some practice, of course. I think very few people have the kind of visual processing issues that don't allow them to get into it. And if that's you, I'm really sorry. Granted, being able to use musical notation isn't something that determines your ability to play music. There are plenty of examples of people who did and do extraordinary things without having read a single note in their lifetime. But for the majority of us, being able to read music means we won't have to reinvent the wheel over and over again. We can quickly access and absorb ideas people thought of 50, 100, 300 years ago. We can use those ideas, change them around, maybe even improve on them. We can bring back to life music that hasn't been performed in decades and no audio recordings of it exist, and enjoy it or show it to our friends, and so on. I'm going on a whole different rant here. My point is, I think as musicians, and especially as music educators and teachers, we should do our best to dispel myths that build up over the years around learning music and find ways to support people willing to learn, give them the clearest and most straightforward answers, and show them that already in Western music alone there are so many different approaches to so many musical topics. And there is really no need to treat your students like they are 5 years old. Unless they're actually 5 years old. Calling every piece of music a song for sake of relatability is like calling every form of written word squiggles. I also don't think hyping up musical notation and terms used in music as difficult and impossible to memorize is doing anyone any favors. Not the learners, not the teachers. Wow, that would have been a pretty good ending to this video. But I have more stuff to talk about. So after the Pianote Method introduces music notation, you actually get a pretty typical music course. Honestly, do yourself a favor and start at level 5. Although it's nothing you won't find in method books available in public domain on Petrucci Library, or frankly, probably some free YouTube tutorials. I guess if you like the instructors on Pianote and the Mary Poppins vibes they have, good for you, you're gonna have a great time. Personally, I'm too terminally European, so if someone seems too positive, I just assume they are on the brink of snapping, and it makes me pretty uncomfortable. Now, let's quickly look at other available things. Of course I had to check it out. I'm a classical musician after all. Overall, I think this was a very decent course. Victoria Theodore is an absolute legend, and I like her calm and elegant style of teaching. I disagree with some repertoire choices. I think she overly and unnecessarily simplifies certain aspects of historical and aesthetical context of the pieces. And sometimes I'm not so sure about her takes on music analysis, but that's just me being a nitpicky nerd. In this course, you'll actually know what to practice and you'll be shown exactly how to do it. If you don't have any prior musical knowledge though, this course will be impossible for you to follow. But if you know how to read music, go for this one. Generally speaking, Pianote has loads of content. After watching 175 method videos and then another 78 classical method videos, and yes, I watched them all in their entirety, I have to admit I only had time and honestly the energy to skim through the rest of their content. What sticks out is live reviews. You submit a video of your playing and one of the coaches reviews it. About the ones I watched, I have mixed feelings. I understand the ethos of positivity and how difficult it is to live stream, but sometimes I felt like I was listening to an essay that had to hit a certain amount of words, because it feels like the coaches are afraid to deliver anything other than compliments. But you can definitely try watching those back and fishing for relevant tips. Browsing through all Pianote's content is quite exhausting though. However, at some point you get an email from a Musora mentor who's supposed to assist with finding the right lessons for you, as well as help in case of technical problems. Personally, I haven't gotten in touch with my mentors, so I don't really have much to say here. I just thought it was fair to mention that they offer such a service. Speaking of emails though, be prepared to get completely spammed by Pianote. You get so many emails, sometimes 2 per day, and it's nothing of substance, mostly just really aggressive marketing. Does it actually work on people? Because I feel like I'm less inclined to buy stuff when I'm annoyed by all the nagging. Someone who knows stuff about marketing, please explain in the comments. There's another feature Pianote offers, forums. I guess if you're a social person who enjoys community, this one seemed pretty friendly to me. However, most of the advice is from fellow learners, not teachers, and as much as you can find lots of genuinely useful tips, some of them are bound to not be very good, so be careful out there. One more thing I should mention, I actually like that Pianote seems to encourage people to improvise. Granted, I don't think they give the people sufficient tools to do that, but a start for trying is in order. Same with ear training. It's noble that an attempt has been made, but I guess I just don't think it was a particularly good attempt. I give Pianote 1 out of 4 Beatles. They promise a lot, but unfortunately I don't think they deliver. In terms of playing songs I love, now I actually hate the Beatles. I used to like them before. In terms of not getting frustrated with music theory, well, that's a huge bummer. I think the method has serious flaws I pointed out earlier that lead to a lot of people getting frustrated. Actually, judging by the significant dip in activity under later videos in the courses, I assume that overwhelming majority of users just gives up. Of course, it rarely happens that 100% of people who start any course get to actually finish it, but if you look at the main Pianote Method stats, for instance, it seems to me like more than typical dropout rates. Again, my only metric is likes and comments, but I think it's telling when 2000 people felt like pressing a like under the first video, but by the middle of the course the number drops to under 200, and by the last lessons it's less than 50. The course has been around long enough, so it's not that the time is the issue here. So, as we've established at the beginning of this video, I'm not your mother, so I won't be telling you how to spend your money. I'm pretty sure that there are some people out there who completely swear by Pianote, and that's fine by me. Personally though, I'd rather save my $30 per month. Alas, it seems that if you want to play the piano, so far the best option you have is finding yourself a decent teacher in person or online. Not me though, I stopped teaching due to health reasons, but I'm sure there's someone out there for you. If you're looking for a more affordable option, you can look for a teacher in Europe. Some people here decided to ruin the market. Anyway, thanks for listening to my words of wisdom. Let it be known that I would really appreciate if you shared your words of wisdom in the comments. I also hear that if you subscribe to this channel, Mother Mary will come to you. And if you fancy yourself a little bit of patron of arts, buy me a coffee. Let it be, let it be, let it be, oh, let it be.